Greetings everyone, it is Zakhele here and we are back with our weekly videos. This week it is about something we are pretty passionate about. If you're a regular watcher of the videos here, you would know we have spoken about this issue quite a while, and that is inflation. And in this context, really, it is the answer to inflation, which is sound money, right? A sound monetary regime. But let us first start by introducing what is inflation. What is this thing that we keep on talking about? As well, some of you may know, inflation is when you have money chasing few goods in an economy, leading to a general increase in prices. Specifically, it is a general increase in prices, right? This is not a specific price increase limited to just one industry or one good as caused by supply and demand of said product, but it is a general increase across the entire economy of prices as caused by a general increase in the supply of money that is not matched by a subsequent productive capacity to meet that general increase in money supply, leading to a situation whereby you have a lot of money chasing fewer goods, meaning leading to an increase in prices. Hopefully you were able to follow that. I think I tried, did an ample enough job of, whittling it down to its core basics. But that is what inflation is. And as you will know, and if you don't, it is something that I am quite opposed to. It is an injustice on every working person and general person in the world because it steals away value that people generate by serving one another. And the reason we're talking about inflation, I think, is pretty topical, right? In South Africa, this week, we'll have a release of CPI numbers, and as such, South Africans will be thinking about the effects of inflation. I hope that they are. And globally, we have, the United States president in Donald Trump kind of really bringing the attention back on institutions like the Federal Reserve. He has been pretty frantic, as we all know, in his tenure as president, but this was a welcome spotlighting, at least from us here at the FMF, on the Federal Reserve, its mandate, what it's supposed to do, and everything like that. And as we all know, we prefer quite a limited Federal Reserve or any central bank, right? Instead of, the current regime that has the ability to increase money supply with impunity without any, consequence. But today we are talking about solutions to this inflationary regime that we find ourselves. I would like to say globally, right? Every country pretty much has an understanding that inflation is a given, unjust as it is. And here at the Free Market Foundation, we have a paper as part of our Liberty First series of papers, one specifically dedicated to sound money. And this is a solution that we proposed then in our ambitious selves to the government of national unity to adopt, right? A sound money policy regime that would have seen an improvement, I would like to think, in the general living conditions of South Africans across the board, because money really impacts everything. It is the basis of economic interaction. And as such, when you have good monetary policy, I think the benefits thereof will be felt across the entire economy, right, instead of targeted interventions. But as part of these solutions that we had to the inflationary regime that we also have in South Africa, we firstly suggested the amendment of the Reserve Bank Act to create additional degrees of separation between the bank and the executive, right? As we currently know in South Africa, even though the South African Reserve Bank is privately owned, it is still quite really intimately tied with the executive and the state branch, and that, the state is the one that pretty much appoints a Reserve Bank governor, and the Reserve Bank Act really is the governing mechanism of the bank itself, meaning that the bank is effectively governed by a state instrument, making it an object of the state. And as part of our solutions, we recommended an amendment to certain provisions within the legislation itself that will allow for greater separation between the executive branch and the bank itself, so that it can be independent and conduct its work without political influence, right? And as we know, political influence, particularly on reserve banks or central banks, is something that every politician is prone to do. And the most glaring example for us in Southern Africa would be, the Zimbabwean case, whereby political influence in the governing of the Zimbabwean central bank led to hyperinflation that the Zimbabwean economy is still dealing with to today. So, and another suggestion that we have, though, is that when appointing members to the board of the Reserve Bank, the president should favor candidates who prefer a clear rules-based approach to monetary policy, which limits the discretion of Monetary Policy Committee to provide greater predictability and trust to economic actors. So pretty much we advocate for an appointment of people to the MPC, right, which is a decision-making body, the Monetary Policy Committee, that determines the interest rates and things that have a huge effect on the South African economy. And we advocate for appointment of individuals who are independent, who are competent, who aren't necessarily tainted by a certain political leaning or political affiliations. And as such, this will provide greater predictability, right, to every economic actor in the South African economy, knowing that the people who are responsible for, charting our economic future, at least using monetary policy, are people who are competent, are people who, even though you may disagree with certain decisions that they may take, right, depending on your ideology, you would understand that they came to said decision on a reasonable basis from whatever ideological position that they may be coming from, or technical position that they may be coming from. And this is, I think, I doubt anyone would ever oppose such a measure. And another suggestion that we had for our state is the amendment of the Reserve Bank to strengthen the emphasis on the bank's core mandate to protect the value of the currency, even if that overrides other concerns of public interest. And this is one that is quite personal to me because I have written quite a lot about the core mandates of the South African Reserve Bank as spelled out in the South African Constitution, and that is the protection of the South African currency. And if you have watched any of my previous videos about inflation, I have mentioned how the very existence of inflation as facilitated by the South African Reserve Bank increasing monetary supply is a violation of this constitutional provision, of this core mandate of the central bank, which is the protection of the value of the rand, because inflation by its nature erodes the value of the rand, and inflation traced back to an increase in money supply, which all inflation is the Reserve Bank violating its constitutional mandate, right? And as such, we propose that the Act should take it a step further. Beyond the Constitution, the Act should specify that the core mandate of the South African Reserve Bank is the protection of the value of our currency, and actual steps in the sense of provisions should be put in to actualize the protection of said currency. And that is even if it is contrary to certain public interest concerns. And this is quite particularly pressing in South Africa because we do have rumblings in our political circles of the mandate of the Reserve Bank being more than the protection of the currency, of the value of the currency, that is, and rather being extended to facilitating economic growth, open-ended as that may be, or eliminating unemployment, open-ended as that may be. And as such, these create problems because these are in reality really just a blank check for the Reserve Bank to print as much money as is possible in pursuit of ending unemployment or in pursuit of facilitating economic growth. And that will bring us, as I have mentioned earlier, to the situation that Zimbabwe found itself in. We should always use Zimbabwe. I have nothing against it. I love Zimbabwean people, and but their states, their political leaders, I may not be the biggest fans of, but we must always use it and as an example because it shows a lesson. I think that Zimbabwean people would want other people to learn from their hardships, right? So that certain mistakes are not repeated, and then we are surprised when we are faced with the same consequences that others faced. And lastly, as another solution to ending our inflationary regime, we propose that there should be legislative clarity on the status of cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange, right? In South Africa, we are fortunate enough, we have quite a few real-life use cases, at least in the Western Cape, of the use of Bitcoin in people's daily lives and daily interactions. And I think a certain level of certainty, right? I know a certain level of certainty will definitely benefit the proliferation, right, of these currencies, irrespective of one's personal belief about cryptocurrencies, but they are a form of exchange that is voluntarily being used by people without it being enforced by a state. I think if you are a proponent of liberty, there's nothing greater than that. There's nothing greater than seeing people use currency willingly. It's at times even to the detriment, even if it's inconvenient, right? Just because they want that freedom. And of course, if the state were to provide certain legislative assurances, I know for a fact that the proliferation will grow much more wider, or at the very least, the people using said currencies will feel much more secure and certain, and the people holding certain these currencies, even for speculative investment reasons, would also be much more secure. Overall, just creating a more secure economic environment, which is always good. But those are our recommendations, and they can be found on the Liberty First site under Sound Money, and you can check out the entire paper by in its entirety. I promise it is a worthwhile read. And most importantly, right, the issue of inflation, I think, is a foundational issue that cuts across every economic or policy issue that we usually speak about. Well, personally, that I speak about, because as I mentioned earlier, money is the foundation of all economic activity. That is what we exchange. At least that is what we use as a medium of exchange. And as such, when the monetary regime is shaky or premised on injustice, just like inflationism, the idea that prices must always increase at all times, right? That very idea is what we must fight against beyond these policy recommendations. The idea that prices are supposed to increase even though human beings are getting better at manufacturing, building things, and as such, the cost of doing said things is going down, but the price of said things must continuously go up. This idea is something that we must vehemently fight against. And initiatives like Liberty First Sound Money paper are only just one aspect of the fight. We hope that you in your personal life will firstly go and read the paper and start actively thinking about whether does even the Reserve Bank deserve to exist as a beginning, and when it exists, how should it exist? We already have a constitution that gives it a mandate it should stick to, and as such, we hope that whichever decision makers that are responsible for said decisions will finally listen to the constitution, follow it, and we hopefully have a just monetary regime. But that will be all from me. Please tell me your thoughts. What do you think? Are you a proponent of inflationism? Are you a proponent of modern monetary theory? Do you want the proverbial taps of the monetary supply to be opened non-stop? Or do you agree with me, disagree? Please tell me what you think below in the comments. Share the video, like it as always, subscribe if you're unsubscribed, and remember, stay free.